Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Happy Tuesday, Dr. Paul. How are you?
You ready and raring to go?
Yes.
Solve the problems?
I'm going to solve problems.
I often wonder whether we ever solve anything. We call attention to the problems,
Yeah.
and we make suggestions.
And we
But I
pester.
guess, that's part of the philosophy of liberty. You never know how liberty spreads.
Yeah.
You never know who has endorsed it. And every once in a while, I hear back from somebody that, heard something 15 years ago, and somebody I never heard of, and yet they've been very busy in the fields.
Yeah.
And of course, I make the point that all you have to do is talk to one person per day, and you're contributing something.
That's right.
So that's why we would like our viewers to be enthusiastic to find us a new subscriber every day to tune into the Liberty Report, because that would help us. It would give us encouragement too.
Exactly.
But today I want to start off with testing.
Yeah.
This whole mess started with testing.
Yep.
Remember the testing and the PCR test, the original test was all messy. It's still messy, very messy. But all of a sudden, the tests are coming up very, very positive. Large number of pandemics, worse than anything ever. So they have to lock down again. People are caving in, and the businessman is capitulating. Everybody's capitulating because, there's so many positive tests. But one statistic that we're going to talk about is, maybe it's because they're doing more testing and finding people, because we do know that the COVID right now is very weak, and it isn't making people real sick, so it's not so crucial. But the test numbers are skyrocketing, and they're worse than ever, and they're locking down again. But the one thing we know that it's not authentic, because there's more resistance now than ever.
Yeah.
At the beginning, nobody would resist it or say boo, but now the people are getting sick and tired of it. Not only here in the States, but around the world. You see the resistance building, and that is all good. But Zero Hedge had an article today, and Is the Omicron surge mostly due to massively increased testing? They ask a question on that. But in my mind, my answer is a very strong probably so, because we do know that they're testing like crazy, and that of course, if you test and look, remember when the PCR test was first started, and they continued to be able to manipulate the PCR, but it was very clearly pointed out eventually that, especially by the person who designed the test, that if you run the test longer and searching for these small little particles, you can probably get a positive out of anything you want.
Yeah.
And so that was discredited. They've modified the test, but I understand the test is still far from perfect. But they are using this to promote the lockdown, and that's the danger, the encroachment of our liberties, and this is the big thing. That the increase in testing has been massive, but fortunately now we're seeing some reports to show and to document exactly how much increase there's been in testing, and some of the results that seem to be far from perfect.
Yeah, well, the goal is simply to get everyone to take 2 shots and then boosters. Boosters over and over every 3 months, whatever they decide. That's the goal. They don't want to have any treatments. We know that. We watched McCullough on Joe Rogan's show. They don't want treatments. They want you to get the shot, and that's it. So that's why testing now with the Omicron scare, and all you have to do is look at the headlines, look at Drudge, look at the TV. It's a massive, massive scare campaign to scare people into getting the shots, but also to get tested. You got to get tested. We watched Fauci yesterday saying, if you want to have a Christmas party, you better get your double vax and a booster, plus put on your mask, plus make everyone test at the door before you get a piece of turkey, piece of ham, test. But we know, as you said, we've talked about it, the New York Times ran an article, it wasn't us saying it, 90% of the tests may be false positives. 90% of the positives may be false positives. That was back in August. But there's more need to test over and over and over. But what's happening? Something interesting, and this is from the Zero Hedge article. Here's an interesting chart from the UK. Let's put this up if we can. This is, if you read the chart, it's interesting, and obviously deaths are a trailing edge to infections. But look at the red line, which is tests conducted in the UK. Massive, massive increase. The positivity has only slightly increased of late. But look at deaths. They are absolutely flat. And again, it's a trailing edge. We don't know what will happen, but you're looking at the increase in tests beginning around the end of October, and now we're 2 months into that, and you're seeing deaths completely flat. So something is happening, and this chart, I think, explains what it is.
Do you remember when the wars were starting in the early part of the century, and we were fighting that battle, and they would do something, and then they would come back, and they would doctor up the investigations, and they would doctor it up to justify what they were doing.
Yeah, what they'd already done. Yeah.
That's what this reminds me of. This treatment precedes the diagnosis. Yeah. They've decided how many shots the people are going to get, and then they decide, well, we have to have the diagnosis. So they go and max it up, maximize it by getting all these tests done. And that might have been from the very beginning, that we know what we want. We know that there's a pandemic on horizon, so therefore we're going to prove it with positive tests, which means that they can't keep it secret forever. And that's why people are starting to realize there's something very, very strange going on, and that's why the resistance is building, and that's why I think that this thing can finally stop, but it won't be easy. But that's one thing we'd like to do, is talk about this, because people realize that everything they read about the number of cases, just like at the very beginning with all this, fictitious reportings on the PCR, that these tests now are done. The chart there is perfect example of the falsehood, or at least leading to questions. Like you suggest, maybe we don't have all the evidence yet, but right now the evidence shows that there's a lot of messing around and reporting on these tests.
And you're having, because we've already seen several of the so-called experts have said that 40% of the cases of Omicron are asymptomatic. You don't know that you have it. But people are rushing out to get tested because they're terrified of being told what's racing through society. So you're having, we've seen pictures of huge lines of people testing. Of course, when they're in line, they're probably spreading the germs to each other, but huge lines. But, our friend Jordan Schachtel, who's done a lot of great work, believe it or not, it's been a year ago, he wrote this article, "Welcome to the COVID Testing Industrial Complex, which is fast becoming a $100 billion a year industry." It's just as true a year later as when he wrote it in 2020. And he talks about the massive amounts of money. And we've talked about it on the show too. Follow the money. Why are they pushing the jabs over and over? Follow the money, follow the profits. Why are they pushing this over and over? Let's look at this next clip, because this is a quote from his article of last December. This give you a little bit of a taste of what kind of money we're talking about. And we have talked about this before, but it's worth revisiting. The U.S. COVID-19 testing industrial complex now churns out around 2 million COVID tests a day. That puts the current median cost for COVID testing in America at approximately $254 million a day, $7.6 billion a month, and $91.4 billion a year. That's more annual cash than revenue generated by Boeing, Intel, FedEx, Facebook, and Target. And what about profits, Dr. Paul? Don't forget those. Let's put up the next one, because all that testing results in a lot of profits in a lot of well-connected companies. And as Jordan points out, $42 in revenue per test for Quest, which is one of the companies. That would come out to $26 million in profits per day, $780 million per month, $9.3 billion in pure profits per year. Dr. Paul, we need to also add a testing center to our studio so we can afford to upgrade our studio.
Oh, come on now. Well, that's about what motivates people to do it. At the beginning, there were other people that were motivated to bring this chaos about. A true believing cultural Marxist would like it because the lockdown is very chaotic, and they thrive on that. And there are other people who just like big government. There are other people who are just locked in because they're in government and they're authoritarians, and the whole reason why you're an authoritarian is you get to write law, with an executive order. So there's a lot of motivations by people. But I think this one almost could be a Johnny-come-lately, because they weren't, before it started, they were poor, and maybe when they saw this coming, whether they planned it or joined in, but certainly the evidence now is pretty darn strong that there's a lot of money involved, and it is an industrial complex, and that is easy to explain. But of course, the sadness that we have expressed many times is that our allies on this, when corporations are eating the lunch of the average person, that they desert us and say, oh, this is good, we have to do it. But the irony of all this is the pretense is, this is free, so all poor people can get it. Free around the world too. They've manufactured so much. We have so much of this free stuff. Let's make sure we use it up. You know? And we don't want to harm people, so we don't want the test to really tell us anything. So because if we get the answers and the results, they wouldn't have the motivation to get the people behind it. But this is astounding. That there's so much money involved, and it fits into the category. A lot of people have an incentive to make government big, and this whole thing of who pays for it, the free stuff. I really think the people who suffer the most, who are the ones who don't question anything the government tells them. And you say, yeah, but they don't have to pay for this. They're going to tax the rich for this, aren't they? Well, no, they don't tax the rich to pay for this. The rich get the benefits. What they do is they run up deficits. And, just look at trillions of dollars worth of deficits. What they do, they monetize it. They printed the money. And, what does that do? Well, it raises the cost of living for poor people that we're supposed to be helping, and they not only do they have the stress of dealing with COVID, now they have the stress of an economy and going to the store to buy groceries, and grocery prices are going up more than 8 or 9%.
Oh, yeah.
You ask somebody that has to shop, it's a lot higher than that. So the irony is just terrible, and it's just too bad that people can't wake up and just question it, read it, and find out exactly what's going on, because the information is out there. What we hope to do is be able to call attention to these individuals who have spotted this early on, and certainly there's many friends out there, and I believe that the numbers are growing. But the power of the media is such, and the power of government propaganda, it's a tough competition that we're up against.
Yeah, and this is one thing we've learned from the Trump years and from COVID, is that our one-time allies among progressives, and there are some good exceptions, they used to be skeptical about the national security state and the big horrible corporations in bed with government, and now they fell in love with both of them. So it is depressing, but you talk about free things, Dr. Paul, and if you want to get more positives, if you want to scare more people, let's put up this next clip. This is from NBC in Washington. This is good news. Hey, White House to make 500 million at-home COVID tests available for free, so they can turn it up and down as they wish. And you know who benefits from this? As you say, Dr. Paul, the authoritarians. Let's look at the next clip. Here is an authoritarian. This is the mayor of D.C. Averaging 1 COVID-19 death per day, D.C. declares a state of emergency and new mandates. Look at her. She's drunk with power. She's literally drunk with power. But back here on Planet Reality, Dr. Paul, let's look at the next clip. Things are a little different because South Africa, which got Omicron first, they're the first ones to show it. These two charts tell you everything you need to know. The top chart is cases. They are higher than they have ever been. It spreads very, very fast. But on the bottom, look at deaths. It's done nothing. And again, deaths are a trailing edge. That's fine. But look at deaths. There's no, by now we're a good month into Omicron in South Africa, 5-6 weeks into it. There's no death spike. So as someone pointed out when they put this chart up, it looks a lot like a common cold.
I'm very reserved and claiming too much success, and I call attention to, we really called this one right. But I feel very good about our program today, because I think so far the explanation for that chart has come from what we said. Whether we've said it clearly enough and
Yeah.
people understand it or convinced anybody, but it really does explain that charge. More cases and no increase in disease, but greater motivation for the government to bear down on us and reinstate the sanctions and the lockdowns. So I hope that message got there, but it's there. It's around. The people can find it. Our viewers can find it not only on our website but other websites too. And it's been around, and I think there's going to be more and more of that explanation on how can this be if there's so many more cases? Why not lock down? Because it's spreading wildfire.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the statistics are wrong. Maybe they're measuring something that doesn't exist. Maybe it's a cold they're measuring. You know, these tests are still very questionable. You know, I kept thinking that they sort of iron things out, but I think overall, because so many different companies have this and they go in, but everybody has, the free doesn't go all the way through. People still have to pay when they go get them.
Yeah.
Get the test.
Well, we want to look at a couple of other things, minor stories, but smaller stories. And the next one is a big one because the Pentagon, finally, they're cracking down on all that extremism. What does that mean? Are they going to prohibit neocons from coming in the Pentagon, or what do you think it means?
Oh yeah, it's an excuse to test. Well, what the excuse is that there are some bad people out there, and they have to be screened to make sure that somebody with radical ideas, maybe they're a radical libertarian, and you know, really want to demand their rights, and they're using the podium of the Pentagon to promote the cause of liberty. Oh well, we have to stop that.
Yeah.
So, no, they want to screen them, and because there might be somebody would be not, you know, the libertarian. Supposed to be very nonviolent, but what if this person wants to go in there, and there will be some. I was told one time, I don't know if they ever proved this to be, but like 3 or 4% of the people that go into the military are sort of psychopathic. You know, they like it, you know, and we've heard some of these people that come back, they get the honor and the honors because they were real good at doing their job of killing people in undeclared wars, you know, this sort of thing. So that to me, that's their justification, but their justification, I think, is still this cultural Marxism stuff and to cause chaos. If they like chaos in the streets, why wouldn't they want chaos in our schools? Why wouldn't they want chaos in the military?
Yeah.
And there are now many stories with all this cultural nonsense happening that you have a weakening in the so-called basic principle of somebody that's supposed to be able to militarily defend our country, and they're you know doing this, and they still think that these people can. And here we have some people going in, and I'm sure there are courses in the military that are like in our schools, trying to confuse children to the point where they're still trying to figure out, they've made it a problem that little kids aren't positive whether they're a boy or girl.
Yeah.
I mean, it really adds up to insanity. But that social mischief that's on there, that's to me what I think is going on there. This pre-testing of people coming into the military, but it's just more of this authoritarianism, this control of people, like they are on lockdowns and using the war on COVID as the excuse. And now it's the military, a far cry from the way a military would be used in a libertarian society.
Well, we already know that time and time again, the FBI has designated people with, quote, anti-government views as domestic terrorists. And they even talked, I think it was Homeland Security that once talked about Ron Paul followers being potential domestic terrorists. And you can easily imagine someone who goes into the military who believes in a constitutional republic with separation of powers, falling under the category that they would consider extremists, because you are extremely dedicated to the Constitution. And I think that's what they're doing. But what they're doing now is they're looking at social media. So if you are a service member and you go onto your Facebook and you click like on an article, and the military determines that that article has extremist content, then you are going to be in big trouble. You're going to be facing the UCMJ. You're going to be facing some big problems.
The greatness of the free society is long gone. But you know, One thing that testing, and I say this with a little bit of a tongue in cheek, but I think the principle is good. And that is, if you really wanted to screen somebody, I think maybe the people who lead our country, and maybe when we do our voting, we should at least pay attention to people who have sociopathic and psychopathic tendencies. They should be screened for getting into policy positions.
Yeah.
Why do we put them in and making these decisions? Because, in many ways, the masses of number of people who go into the military, are in for various reasons, and some it's financial, and it has nothing to do, with national defense and all.
Yeah.
They do it because they have to have a job and this sort of thing. But I would think the greatest harm comes when our leaders endorse sociopathic ideas and then take us to war needlessly. It gives us wars of 20 years, and it's so slow for the people to wake up. So a little bit more screening. I advocate voluntary screening, but we ought to be more careful on the people we send up there who make these declarations of war. And just think, there has to be a few around, and they've been around. Just think, we've never used the Constitution since 1941 to justify going to war.
Well, that's a great point. Who is the more extremist? A person who's attached to the Constitution, or a person who's calling for us to have a preemptive strike against Russia? Who is the real extremist here, right?
That's for sure.
The last one we want to talk about is in the White House, Dr. Paul, and let's put up that last clip if we can, because you're going to be surprised. Vaccinated and boosted White House staffer tests positive for COVID after spending Friday with Biden. The White House is almost 100% double vaxxed, boosted, masked, everything else, and still there's an outbreak of Omicron.
I want to caution people. I'm going to say something extreme, and I hope it doesn't get you into any trouble. I would say that's enough justification for us to quit the screening of people in the White House if it hasn't helped any. If the sick people the people that we designate have been positive. If I had a choice going into a room or a party or anything else, it looks to me like there's statistics that would show that the person has had all the vaccinations, especially now with all these boosters. That's really confusing the testing. That there's probably, because they have now proven that they can spread the disease, and that if you have natural resistance to this, if you have natural immunity, the odds of you spreading it way down. There's never an absolute, but way down compared to what they're identifying now that people have been vaccinated with all this and continue with the boosters. Then of course the other things motivated. That's not maybe their first goal. Their first goal right now, their top goal is probably making money.
Yeah. Well, that's the question. How long are they going to continue to demonize and blame unvaccinated people who, as you say, may have natural immunity that's much higher? How long are they going to blame them when it becomes more and more obvious, even in the literal belly of the beast, the White House, even in the White House, that vaccinated people are spreading the virus willy-nilly? When are they going to start leaving the unvaccinated alone?
To me, the big thing that has concerned me, and I've expressed it, is the whole goal of having a vaccine passport. This idea you can't move around or get a job or do anything without following all these rules. But medically speaking, I think this whole thing that they are able to take somebody who has natural immunity and even, voluntarily go and prove that they have antibodies against it are still the enemy.
Yeah.
They're considered, very bad people, selfish, evil people who want to kill people. It's just totally insane. And yet they're probably the safest people around because they already have the immunity, and they're going to be much safer to be around than to be around people that have had a lot of shots, and all of a sudden you find they have, and there have been some studies. One at college, it was at Yale, where all the tests were done by people who had been vaccinated.
Cornell,
all the ones that turned out positive, for it had been fully vaccinated. Fully vaccinated. So, but next month, to stay fully vaccinated and get all that protection,
get another
line
one.
it up. They're free.
Yeah. Well, they'll say, well, but yeah, it doesn't stop spreading, but it makes it more mild. But you don't know because you don't know how mild it would have been with it or without it. So
Yeah, that proves nothing.
yeah. So anyway, I guess if we're about done,
Go ahead, close it.
scattershot in here. I just want to thank our viewers again for watching the show. Please subscribe to this channel. Please hit like so our algorithms are better. Whenever I go on to YouTube, even when I'm logged in, I used to see the Liberty Report up there as a suggestion. I don't see it anymore. I don't know what's going on, Dr. Paul. We must be irritating some people. But please do that. Help us out a little bit. Go to ronpaulinstitute.org and sign up for updates there for free, and just so we can keep in touch. And thanks again for watching the show. Dr. Paul?
One of the things that I hear back, those who don't understand what's going on, and they'll say, libertarianism sounds good. People want their liberties. They want their freedom. If you take a poll, everybody sort of wants their freedom. Their definition is just a lot different. And when you talk to them about voluntarism and property rights, and all, said, that's really good. But one thing where they stop is, well, during the campaign, I was always told, Ron, we do agree with most of that stuff you say, but not on the military. We need to protect our empire. Well, that was a disagreement on foreign policy. But the other thing they'll do is they say, yeah, it's good. We want more freedom and low taxes and less regulation. But if you just had freedom, there'd be anarchy and total chaos. But the rules of the free market and the rules of liberty are pretty darn strict, because you can't hurt other people, you can't steal from other people, and now we use the government to do all that. The government comes in, and redistributes wealth. As far as I'm concerned, the Federal Reserve, what they do is nothing more than illegal. It's counterfeiting, and the regulation is theft. You're taken from one group and given to another group, and the rules are always controlled. Like the big corporations have been able to control what's going on in COVID, but the people who want protection, they will always find a way to get around it if they have the money. But I tell you what, let's take environmentalism for instance. I think if you have a strict understanding of what it's like to own property, it doesn't mean you can pollute and do everything to your neighbor. You don't have any right to pollute your neighbor. And throughout the industrial revolutions and for years afterwards, even now, they use that. The government and big corporations have been working together. Oh, they pretend now they're allies and all this, but initially they were really, partners in pollution. In a libertarian free society, you're not allowed to damage your neighbor's property, and all of a sudden the rules get stricter. Another thing is you can't break the contracts, and that the government's breaking contracts all the time. What about the liability? The government's always excusing somebody for the liability. Just think, well, now this is a big deal, all these drugs and things. There's people getting sick, and there's a lot of people getting sick. Well, drug companies aren't worried. They've been exempted by the government, by politicians, by the people allowing their government to do it. So, no, don't ever let the people tell you that you people who want this freedom, it's nothing but anarchy and chaos. But I tell you what, it would be a much safer and freer society, because you would still have an understanding of your obligation and responsibility to protect your own safety. The government can't make us safe. So if you do that and think that you can have a society like that and take away the Second Amendment, it won't work. And that's part of the strategy now, the cultural Marxism, is not to assume the people have the responsibility of taking care of themselves and providing their own safety and security. I vote for liberty over authoritarianism. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.